important, a beloved man of faith and family. In his 92 years, Werner was a man embodying values of integrity and honesty. He was committed to leading by example, inspired many of us around him. A former school principal, Werner became the leader of the Alberta Social Credit Party from 1973 to 1975. A foundational member of the Reform Party of Canada, he was instrumental in its inception in British Columbia. His political career blossomed when he became the Member of Parliament for Kelowna Lake Country, serving from 1993 to 2006. He's lovingly remembered by his remarkable wife, Tina, his sons, Alan and Dwayne, and their spouses, Lori and Cheryl, along with his grandsons, Tyler and Wyatt. Rest in peace, Werner. Canada, as a country, is better off having you served with distinction.
I remember Mr. Smith fondly. He will be missed. The honourable member from Willowdale.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for hosting a dinner last night to warmly welcome a delegation headed by the Honourable Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea and 6 members of Korean Parliament. I believe all members of this House
Smudge, I heard they're trying to ban cigarettes.
Official relations between Canada and Korea have never been stronger. Our bilateral ties have experienced a renaissance in the last several years, marked by countless visits by our heads of government and high-level ministerial visits. In fact, Minister Ng will be departing for a Team Canada trade mission to Korea shortly. Given the bedrock of shared democratic values, our two countries have strengthened our economic, security, and cultural ties to forge a strong, stable, and prosperous partnership on both sides of the Pacific. Our countries are each certainly stronger working together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wow. The honourable member from Niagara Centre.
Mr. Speaker, during National Tourism Week, we recognize the tremendous impact tourism has on all our regions across this great nation and, of course, the Canadian economy. Our government is there to support our tourism sector with, for example, the Tourism Growth Fund, available across Canada. The Niagara Tourism Network, our region's destination marketing organization, works hard to promote the magnificent Niagara region and all it has to offer to more than 14 million visitors a year. All 12 municipalities contribute to a plethora of destinations: the falls, wineries, culinary, indigenous, historical, and waterfront destinations, white sand beaches, recreation trails, sport tourism, sport fishing, unique shopping districts, events, and festivals. Mr. Speaker, Niagara continues to open its front door to welcome the world. Happy Tourism Week.
Order. The honourable member from Cumberland Colchester.
Mr. Speaker, Joy Bond, Peter Bond, Gina Goulet, Elizabeth Joanne Thomas, John Joseph Zoll, Corey Ellison, Don Madsen, Frank Galenchin, Aaron Tuck, Emily Tuck, Jolene Oliver, Sean McLeod, Alana Jenkins, Tom Bagley, Lisa McCulley, Constable Heidi Stevenson, Heather O'Brien, Kristen Beaton, Baby Beaton, Greg Blair, Jamie Blair, Joey Weber, Lillian Campbell Hyslop. These are the names of the 23 Canadians who were savagely murdered on the 18th and 19th of April 2020. 4 years have passed today, and the wounds that were inflicted on Colchester County and all of Nova Scotia and indeed Canada have yet to fully heal. Remember these names. They were our friends, our co-workers, our loved ones, and our neighbors. May they rest in peace, and may they never be forgotten.
The honourable member from Burn Bonavista, Trinity.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize a truly fantastic person and mayor in my riding of Bonavista Beer and Trinity. Mayor Tony Keats of the great town of Dover Recently, Mayor Keats was shortlisted as a top candidate in the World Mayor competition. World Mayor is a biennial award organized by City Mayors Foundation since 2004. Out of the 25 global candidates, Mayor Keats was the only Canadian mayor to make the list. Mr. Speaker, thanks to a local voting campaign, Mayor Tony Keats was one of the top 4 finalists, winning the World Mayor Community Award for 2023. Recently, a local event was held in Dover, April 8, to celebrate his win. Tony is a true advocate for the town of Dover, which you may know for its fault line and or being featured in Come From Away. He is well appreciated by his constituents as a shining example of the passion and positive influence local politicians have for their communities. Mr. Speaker, join with me in congratulating Mayor Tony Keats. Good job.
The honourable member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Budget 2024 has dropped. The reviews are in, and I'm sure NDP members and Liberals are excited. Let's see what they've had to say. Former Finance Minister Bill Morneau said that aspects of this budget are clearly negative to our long-term goal, which is growth in the economy, productive growth and investments. But I'm sure he's just a random Liberal, right? So let's see what the NDP had to say. I'm sure they're excited. Former NDP leader Tom Mulcair said it fell way short and that it will really give a sock to the jaw of a lot of small business people, entrepreneurs and artisans, and that it's not actually going after the super rich, it's going after super ordinary Canadians. Well, Conservatives agree. This budget should have been about growth, and instead it's more failure, more tax and spend. The good news is it wasn't like this before this Prime Minister, and it won't be after. Common sense Conservatives have a common sense plan. Let's bring it home!
The honourable member from Sturgeon River Parkland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are suffering the consequences of this government's weak on crime agenda. Canadians' cars have become a target for organized crime. In Canada, a car is stolen every 6 minutes. And since this Prime Minister took office in 2015, car thefts have tripled in Canada's major cities. The situation is so bad that the New York Times has described Canadian streets as a candy store for car thieves. Criminals are emboldened because of this NDP Liberal government's weak justice policy. Ontario Provincial Police have confirmed that 68% of convicted car thieves spend less than 6 months in jail. With sentences like these, it's no wonder that criminal networks are focusing their efforts on targeting Canadians. Car theft is not a victimless crime. The profits from these stolen cars are directly funding violence in our communities, including drug trafficking and homicide. Common sense Conservatives have the only plan that will stop the crime, chaos, and corruption on our streets. It's time to get tough on violent repeat offenders and secure our borders.
I like that guy. Lloyd's pretty good.
Member from Steveston, Richmond East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Sikh Heritage Month celebrations continue all April, Vaisakhi night at BC Place Stadium was packed with amazing performances by anthem singer Jaggi Bajwa, legendary singer Jazzy B, and finally our Whitecaps beating Toronto FC 4-0. Before the match, I had the opportunity to participate in a kickoff message with Whitecaps legend Carl Valentine and young heroes Malia and Noah Kamar, encouraging fans to register as organ donors. Malia and Noah were chosen as Whitecaps kid captains through their work to raise organ donor awareness with BC Transplant in memory of their mother and healthcare worker, Anju, a dear friend who saved 8 lives by donating her organs. As one of the thousands of fortunate Canadians to have access to great medical care and a donor, I encourage all Canadians to learn and promote organ donor awareness among their friends and family. I wish this House will join me to recognize the efforts of BC Transplant, the Kamar family, Vancouver Whitecaps, and all volunteers and all staff who work collaboratively. Together we can build healthier communities and save lives.
The honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, today I stand to offer my sincere congratulations to those members of the Inter-Council Network of Provincial and Regional Councils for Global Cooperation. They are celebrating an important milestone of 50 years. The ICN is a coalition of 8 provincial and regional councils. The ICN represents hundreds of Canadian organizations in every region and every province from coast to coast to coast. The first council was in my home province of Alberta, the Alberta Council for Global Cooperation, which began engaging Canadians and supporting international development operations in 1973. The Manitoba and Saskatchewan councils began their work 1 year later, and the Quebec, Ontario, Atlantic, BC, and Northern councils followed after that. These organizations are a cornerstone of Canadians' international development efforts, engaging Canadians through innovative public engagement initiatives, improving development principles, and we are all so thankful and proud of the work that they do for Canadians.
L'honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly.
Monsieur le Président, samedi.
Mr. Speaker, next Saturday, Guy Rocher, one of the great thinkers of the Quiet Revolution, is emblematic of secularism in Quebec. It will be his 100th anniversary. This century of wisdom should be celebrated. He's one of the unsung heroes of the Quiet Revolution, since he played a role in the Parent Commission, which led to the creation of one of the greatest universities in Quebec and Canada.
I agree, Justice Warrior.
The network
totally agree.
of Quebec universities and the extraordinary network
hey everybody.
of CEGEPs,
Everybody
which
that's
is
just joining in,
unique
we've probably
to
got another
Quebec.
10 minutes till question period.
Graduate of Laval, Montreal, and Harvard universities, this sociologist was the first to understand that modernizing our education system is impossible without secularization. This allows us to better understand Quebec. We took inspiration from his calm, his tenacity, and 100 years for rocher, a French word for rock, isn't old at all.
The honourable member from Red Deer, Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are struggling to make ends meet. This year, Canadians will spend over $46 billion to service this Prime Minister's debt. But the Prime Minister's costly coalition doesn't stop there. On April 1st, these NDP Liberals increased the federal carbon tax by 23%. This increase affects the cost of living for all Canadians, including a major increase in gasoline prices. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. But it's not just Liberals like David Dodge and Bill Morneau that think his spending is out of control. Former Finance Minister John Manley stated his spending balloons inflation and interest rates. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives will vote non-confidence in this budget unless they cap the spending with a dollar-for-dollar rule to bring down inflation and lower interest rates. And for every new dollar spent, the government must find a dollar in savings and immediately pass Bill C-234 in its original form to axe the tax on farmers and food.
Well said. The honourable member from Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, Wally Firth, my predecessor here as the first Indigenous member of Parliament from the Northwest Territories, passed away last month at the age of 89 years old. He served as the NDP MP for the Northwest Territories from 1972 to 1979. He was also one of the first Indigenous managers at the Hudson Bay, one of the first Northern Indigenous commercial pilots, and a radio host and a journalist at CBC North. Mr. Firth was an advocate for addressing poverty and injustices Indigenous people have suffered. Wally also pushed the federal government to negotiate modern land claim agreements with the Dene and the Inuit. Interesting to note, we're still after the same things 50 years later. Wally did speak with me before his passing to talk about these issues and to catch up on family and friends. He will be remembered as a trailblazer. He was humble, a great listener with passion for music, who loved to pick up the fiddle. Message home, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, good job, good job.
The fiddle? No, I don't know a single person that plays the fiddle.
All questions orales. The honourable member from Thornhill.
Liberal NDP government and their soft on crime policies, Canada's criminal justice system is broken and Canadians feel unsafe in their neighbourhoods. Here's where we're at today. The biggest gold heist in Canadian history, $20 million gone, several suspects involved with gangs and gun running, and they're already out on bail 24 hours later. Wow. Why does this government think that gangsters who steal millions of dollars deserve to be released back into the community?
That's right.
That's wild.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada.
I thank the member opposite for that important question. I point out to her and to other members of this chamber that we passed significant bail reform legislation in this chamber with the cooperation of premiers around the country and law enforcement officials around the country. What I would also point out to the member opposite is that I share her concern for organized criminality. In fact, I share it so much so that the Budget Implementation Act contains measures that will address money laundering and address financing through criminality. I desperately hope that that member and all of her colleagues will be supporting that aspect of our legislation and helping us to tackle organized crime and money laundering.
Before I continue with question period for the Honourable Member for Thornhill, who will want to ask her question, I'm going to ask the member from Grand River Miramichi, as well as the member from Dufferin-Caledon, please, to wait your turn before taking the floor. The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Speaker, it didn't work because Liberals do think that these criminals should be released back into the community because they passed the very bills that made it possible. And they are the reason why gun runners and gangsters who steal millions of dollars in gold get turned back loose into the streets. Did the Prime Minister get a little golden nugget from these criminals to pass his catch and release Bill C-75? When will they finally reverse these policies, protect our communities, and keep criminals in jail where they belong? Yeah.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, our resolve to ensure communities are safe is strong. What we did in the past 18 months is we've enacted legislation that addresses the acute causes of crime. What we've done in the past 18 months is ensure that the bail reform system deals with violent, serious offenders, and we had the support of law enforcement right around this country. The other thing that law enforcement has been talking to me and my colleague, the Minister of Public Safety, about is the acute need to address organized criminality in this country. Previous times legislation has been in this chamber, they have voted against such legislative initiatives. They have one more opportunity, but they've already announced they won't be supporting us getting tough with money laundering and organized criminality.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Speaker, they're out on bail less than 24 hours later. The Liberal incompetence touches so much more than the criminal justice system. You might need a nugget of gold to buy gas in Ontario today. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, his carbon tax prices have hiked the cost of gas by 14 cents a litre today. If he refuses to call a carbon tax election, will the Prime Minister put a pause on his punishing hikes over the summer so that Canadians can take a little road trip? Or will he do everyone in this country a favor and take a permanent road trip so the Canadians can afford to live?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 8 out of 10 families receive more in the carbon rebate than they pay on the carbon price. The reason is that all the proceeds from the carbon price are sent back to Canadians. Wealthier families pay more, so low-income and middle-class families get more, Mr. Speaker. 8 out of 10 families get more from the carbon rebate.
If they got more, then why would they want to stop polluting? They would just keep polluting.
That reduces pollution, that reduces the cost of climate change.
It doesn't make any sense.
Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins, Lévis. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, the cost of living has reached a truly alarming level. Food banks are busier than ever. Criminals have total impunity, and affordable housing is so scarce that Quebecers are forced to live in motels, Mr. Speaker. Canadians who can no longer afford housing or even food, that is the reality today. This Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. Will he show Canadians a little empathy, or will he continue to make their living conditions worse, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh, guys, he knows how to count to 6.
That's the number of units of affordable housing created by the Conservative leader when he was housing minister during his whole mandate for the whole country. It's difficult to talk about empathy when we think of the Conservative leader who created 6 affordable housing units, 1 for each 6 million Canadians during his mandate. There were 170 created in my colleague's riding recently. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins, Lévis. I'll give him a number, 9. 9 years of this Liberal government means 9 years of inflationary policies, 9 years of wasting Canadians' money, and 9 years of reckless disregard for them. Money everywhere but in Canadians' pockets, criminals everywhere but in jail, and affordable rents everywhere but in Canada. Why so much failure? The answer is as simple as it is glaring. It's because of this Prime Minister who isn't worth the cost. Can he put an end to the budgetary mess and give a little more thought to Canadians who can't even afford housing because of him? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague is talking about affordable housing. 6 affordable housing units under the Conservative leader when he was Minister of Housing for his whole mandate for the whole country. In just her riding, 173. In just her riding, 173 affordable housing units have been created by municipalities with financial help from the Canadian government. As her leader continues to insult Quebec's municipalities, calling them incompetent, with 6 affordable housing units, there are 173 affordable housing units that have been built in her riding. Once again, I invite members to not speak when they have not been recognized by the Speaker. In particular, I am referring to my friend, my dear colleague from Portneuf, Jacques Cartier. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. The Prime Minister's budget is a budget of threats. The Prime Minister is threatening the provinces with cuts to housing money if they don't accept federal conditions. He's also threatening cities with cuts to public transit funding if they don't agree to have their zoning rules dictated by him. Funny, these are exactly the same threats proposed by the Conservative leader. Canadians already had someone bossing them around at the federal level without proposing any real solutions. Since the budget, they have a second. As for Quebecers, we're stuck with a Liberal Conservative coalition. Do we really need that? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker. Order, please.
Order.
The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois tells us that housing is important. That's great. It's in the budget. They say that helping youth is important. That's great because that's also in the budget. Seniors are also important to the Bloc. Well, look, Mr. Speaker, they're also in the budget. But they're going to do like their Conservative colleagues, their great friends, and they're going to vote against it. It's time for the walk to match the talk. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. The ultimate threat of this budget is its pandering. The Liberals' priority isn't housing, it's their re-election. The numbers say it all. If their priority was housing, they wouldn't have budgeted 97% of the billion dedicated to accelerating apartment construction just after the election. Nor would they have budgeted 91% of the new housing infrastructure fund only after the election. If their priority was housing, they'd be delivering the money now, not after the election. If this isn't their way of saying vote
Morning,
Liberal
Rocky. How's it going?
or you won't get a penny, what is? The Honourable Minister of Public Services
got a lot of
and
French
Procurement.
today. Holy
Thank you,
smokes.
Mr. Speaker. Our colleague is quite right. It's not after, it's now that it's happening. 8,000 housing units in Quebec have been built because of the exceptional partnership between the Government of Canada and the Government of Quebec. 8,000 affordable housing units is the highest number of affordable housing units built in the history of Quebec because of the extraordinary collaboration between the Government of Canada and the Government of Quebec. The only problem, Mr. Speaker, is that that is bad news for the Bloc Québécois. The Honourable Member for Rosemont, La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals don't have the courage to take away the big gifts given to big business by the Conservatives. But cutting 5,000 positions in the public service, they don't mind doing that. Fewer public servants means fewer public services. Like the Conservatives, the Liberals are cutting services, but they give billions of dollars to incompetent subcontractors. Just look at ArriveCan. Why not keep public services by getting rid of subcontractors that cost an arm and a leg and don't do the job? The Honourable President of the Treasury Board. Mr. Speaker, we continue to be responsible in the public service, especially with procurement and also with the public sector. The 2024 budget mentions that there will be natural attrition in the public service. We continue to hold consultations with the public service, with unions, because we know that the public service is here for us, and we continue to be here for them. Thank you.
The honourable member from Vancouver, Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, documents reveal that this government doesn't track job creation from the billions in subsidies they give to corporations. So while Canadians struggle to pay rent and buy groceries, the Liberals, like the Conservatives before them, are shoveling billions of dollars each year to big business with no strings attached. It's bad enough that the Liberals don't make corporations pay their fair share.
You can't even
but
show up
handing
after
them
budget
money
day
without accountability is scandalous. Why are the Liberals giving these corporations a free ride at the expense of Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I am very glad that just the day after the budget, my colleagues give me the opportunity to talk about the great investments that we've been attracting in this country, Mr. Speaker. Just look, for example, Mr. Speaker, last year, Canada ranked third in the world and won per capita for attracting foreign investment. Just think about Nordvolt in Quebec, Mr. Speaker, the largest private investment in the province history. Just talk about Volkswagen, Mr. Speaker, in St. Thomas. This is going to change the whole region. We're creating jobs, we're creating prosperity, we're creating opportunities for generation. Think about Windsor, Mr. Speaker, which young. This is the investment we've seen from North Star is going to change. Mr. Speaker, we're going to fight every day for Canadians.
Again, order. I'd like to remind members, and I know some members who have raised in the past that they've been concerned about the level of noise in here and speaking out of turn. Let us all restrain ourselves so we can hear the question and the answer to the question from the member from Foothills.
After 9 years, Canadian farmers know this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Over the last several weeks, I've received dozens of letters representing tens of thousands of farm families from right across this country. These are grain farmers, ranchers, mushroom growers, fruit and vegetable growers, provincial premiers, and agriculture ministers. They're unanimous. To ensure the sustainability of food production in Canada, they need the NDP Liberal Carbon Tax Coalition to reverse its 23% hike in the carbon tax and pass 234 in its original form. Will the Prime Minister ensure food and farming are affordable and pass 234 in its original form?
The Honourable Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate my honourable colleague's question. But of course, in the budget, there's been good news, not only for Canadians, but farmers right across the country. For an example,
unfortunately, this guy looks like he looks like he's about to croak.
The livestock tax deferral program, which is a big asset to when
no, Trudeau's not in the House
today.
And it's ridiculous because he was in Ottawa this morning meeting with the mayor. So it's not like he's not in Ottawa.
All these things and many more are so important to make sure that farmers and ranchers stay on the cutting edge. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Foothills.
I'm not sure that it's good news when after 9 years of this Prime Minister, demand on food banks is at a record high, and more Canadians can't afford to feed their families. In Prince Edward Island, the Caring Cupboard Food Bank is struggling just to keep its doors open as demand is up 70%. Wow. These are the Agriculture Minister's own constituents. And what is his response? Increase the carbon tax by 23%, driving food costs even higher. Why will this Prime Minister not ensure that farming and food is more affordable and pass Bill C-234 in its original form?
The Honourable Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm kind of surprised to get this question from Amanda, my colleague who was so interested in agriculture. Quite simply, when they were in power, they slashed $500 million from agriculture and agri-food. Right. They slashed $200 million from the business risk management program. All of these things are so important when agriculture has a downturn. We have reinstated the funds and will continue to support our farmers and ranchers right across the country.
The honourable member from Barrie Innisfil.
People in Ontario went into full panic mode last night, lining up to fill up because gas was going up to $1.80 a litre, the highest it's been in 2 years. 18 cents in every litre of gas is because of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister's carbon tax. And by the time the costly coalition is done, the carbon tax will quadruple, rising 61 cents a litre. After 9 years and an extra $10 to fill up overnight, the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. How about cancelling the carbon tax on gas this summer so Canadians can at least enjoy that time-honoured tradition of a road trip?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, when the Conservatives blame the cost of living crisis on carbon pricing and proven emissions reduction strategies, they're only serving the greedy corporate interest of billionaire grocery and oil and gas executives. There's no rebate on the provincial
He's the Parliamentary Secretary to the Environment and Climate Change.
There's no rebate on the summer fuel surcharge or excessive oil and gas profits. But the Canada Carbon Rebate is 4 quarterly payments per year as an incentive to use a little less and get a little bit more tax-free cash in your account 4 times a year. These Conservatives don't have a plan for affordability. They don't have a plan for the environment. They consistently prioritize the corporate interest of their greedy oil and gas masters over the needs of everyday Canadians.
Oh, don't get mad at the paper. The paper didn't do anything to you.
Order. The honourable member from Barrie Innisfil.
If that member is so confident in the carbon tax, I dare him to convince the Prime Minister to call an election. The increase caused so much panic and long lines at gas stations across Barrie Innisfil last night. Costco was so busy that cars were lined up in live traffic on Mapleview. The NDP Liberal government plans on quadrupling the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. The lineups and panic across the country shows that after 9 years, Canadians can no longer afford this costly coalition. Why don't they just come and live with reality and axe the carbon tax so Canadians can afford life?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Speaker, there was an election on the carbon tax. In fact, there was 3 of them. We won them all. And last election, they ran on a promise with Aaron O'Toole. Remember that? Remember his little cover? He cared about the environment for a change. Conservatives all of a sudden cared about climate change, and they were going to use carbon pricing to lower emissions. Well,
Who is
they
this
lost.
guy?
But they still all ran on that promise to price carbon. But when
Who
this
the heck
new
is this
member
guy?
of Parliament, the leader of the Conservatives, the petro puppet of Carleton, came in play.
Order. Colleagues, we can be pointed, we can be passionate, and we can be many things. But what we must always remain to do is to make sure that we're carrying ourselves and we refer to each other politely. The honourable member, the honourable parliamentary secretary knows that. I'm going to ask him just to withdraw that part of his statement, and then he has 5 seconds to finish his question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These Conservatives can dish it out, but they ran on carbon pricing, and they've got no integrity for fighting it at this stage.
You have to retract the statement, though. Kick him out. Come on, get him out.
I did ask the honourable parliamentary secretary just to withdraw that part of his statement so that we could stay on the right side of being polite. The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I apologize for causing a little bit of disruption. It seems that the Conservatives are...
That wasn't an apology. You got to retract what you're saying. Come on.
Disruption in the House. The honourable.
That doesn't count. That doesn't count. Yeah, do your job, man. You told him to retract the statement. He didn't retract the statement. Come on, man. The problem is Greg Fergus is too liberal. He doesn't...
As colleagues know, I see that a very respected member is up on her feet as she knows that there is no points of order during question period. However, I would suggest that she raises this after question period, and we'll deal with it then. The honourable member from Hastings, Lennox and
Oh, come on, Greg. Why'd you take the chair? Come on.
Road trips used to be a staple vacation for many Canadian families. Gas prices in Ontario skyrocketed overnight, pushing $1.80. This is the highest price in 2 years. The Liberal NDP Prime Minister's carbon tax is now at 18 cents a litre of gas, and when he quadruples the carbon tax, it will shoot up even higher.
He kicked out that NDP person yesterday. He's being really hard on Conservatives. But when a Liberal
Mr.
MP...
Speaker, will the Prime Minister cancel the carbon tax on gas this summer so Canadians can afford a family vacation?
The Honourable Minister for Workforce Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's bring some sanity and fact into this conversation. Dan McTeague, who is the president of the advocacy group Canadians for Affordable Energy, said in past years the switch over to summer blend fuel typically results in an increase in fuel of about 6 to 10 cents per litre. In warmer weather, refiners are required to make this change so that the fuel is more stable. There's good news, Mr. Speaker. Prices will come down about 5 cents by Friday. By September, even lower. This has nothing to do with the price on pollution and everything to do with theatrics by the Conservatives.
The Honourable Member.
All right, there, Randy.
The Honourable Member from Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Completely out of touch. There's debt, chaos, hardship and stress hitting Canadians, and it is the policies of this Liberal NDP government that have directly contributed to the pain they are feeling. The reality is the family budget has shrunk, and family vacations are a thing of the past for many. $1.80 for gas this morning. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister cancel the carbon tax and take a permanent vacation so Canadians can afford a small summer road trip?
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
We go through this every year. We change from winter blend to summer blend, and we're required to do so that the fuel stays stable in our vehicles. Mr. Speaker, here's what else Dan McTeague had to say. The most important ingredient in fuel is alkalites, and alkalites are extremely expensive right now. Mr. McTeague said the good news is there will be a 5 cents a litre drop at the pumps by this Friday. We're fighting climate change. This has nothing to do with it. Pure theatrics from Conservatives to scare people while we have the backs of Canadians from coast to coast to coast.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, on page 74 of Budget 2024, it's titled Halal Mortgages. This isn't the first time the federal government has considered Sharia-compliant mortgages. In 2009, CMHC had commissioned a study on the subject. The reaction of the Muslim Canadian Congress at the time had been clear. I quote its founder, Tarek Fatah, "This, halal mortgages, targets vulnerable and marginalized Muslims who are told that if they do business with non-Muslims, they will go to hell." My question is simple, Mr. Speaker. Who exactly is this measure aimed at? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a financial tool that has not been proposed by the government, but that exists. What we've said is that we are going to study this matter to ensure that it is done following the rules. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, the Quebec Lieutenant was lecturing us. Canada is a secular country. We care about secularism too. We're Quebecers. They just want to pick a fight. You know the drill, Mr. Speaker. So if the Liberals are so in favour of secularism, can they tell us why they want to move the election date due to a religious holiday and why they want to introduce elements of Sharia into the mortgage rules of this supposedly secular country? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, this is a financial tool that is absolutely not put forward by our government. We are looking at the product. We want to know if it is fair, if it follows the rules. We are just going to study this matter. There's no intention from our government to support. We just want to make sure it's fair. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Then why is it in the budget, Mr. Speaker? I don't understand. Anyways, Mr. Speaker, we are witnessing a clash of values. While the Minister of Justice intends to use Quebecers' money to challenge Quebec's law on the secular nature of the state, the Liberals are thinking of incorporating more religions into Canadian law. I will once again quote Tariq Fatah, founder of the Muslim Canadian Congress, on halal mortgages. We see this as the financial front of the Islamist movement. These are serious words. Will the government admit that it is not defending secularism, but rather bringing more and more religion into the affairs of the state? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, we are talking about financial tools that are available on the market. This is in no way a product proposed by our government. We want to ensure that this financial product that is on the market is not breaking the rules. Thank you.
Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, he's not worth the cost or the corruption of his $60 million Arrive scam. The Prime Minister's favorite scamster told the House yesterday that his home had been raided by the RCMP for his role in this latest scandal. But he also told the House that the NDP Liberal government hasn't asked for a penny back of the ill-gotten gains. Now, the House has ordered it. Why hasn't this Prime Minister enforced it? When will Canadians get their money back?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend knows, there are internal audits being conducted by the CBSA. The RCMP are looking into this matter. The Auditor General had done a report, and we've accepted the recommendations, and my colleague from Public Services and Procurement has changed many of the rules around these types of contracts. Mr. Speaker, we've also said from the beginning, anybody who abused taxpayers' money will face the consequences. And of course, the government will always seek to recover taxpayers' money that was spent inappropriately.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes.
Well, I'm pleased to hear from the latest candidate to be the next leader of the Liberal Party that he's interested in getting Canadians their money back, because the current Prime Minister has so far refused. And that's what we heard from GC Strategy's frontman yesterday, after telling us that for playing his role in the Prime Minister's latest scandal, his house has been raided, but the Prime Minister has still failed to get Canadians their money back. The House has ordered it, and we just want to know when the Prime Minister and the next person auditioning for his job are going to enforce it. When do Canadians get the cash back?
Great question.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Speaker, again, my honourable friend knows that there are a series of internal audits being conducted with respect to this matter. He referred to the RCMP that are also seized with many of these issues. They took a certain action yesterday, which we heard about in this House as well, Mr. Speaker. I think the honourable member should have some confidence that those who have abused taxpayers' money will face the consequences. And if taxpayers' money has been misplaced or mishandled, of course the government will seek to recover those funds.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. The Prime Minister and his allies in the bloc should be ashamed of having voted to grant millions more for Arrive Can, a decision that made the owners of GC Strategies multimillionaires. Kristen Firth, co-founder of GC Strategies, said yesterday that the Prime Minister has made no move to recover the money wasted on his Arrive Can app. Arrive Can cost $60 million. Yesterday, the Prime Minister ordered his troops not to ask questions and not to seek reimbursement from GC Strategies. The clock is ticking. When will the Prime Minister give Canadians back their money wasted on Arrive Can? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, as I said to our colleague in the past, of course, he knows very well that there are investigations underway, including by the RCMP. There are internal verifications underway. My colleague, the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, has changed some rules following the Auditor General's report, and we've always said that anyone who has abused taxpayer money will have to face consequences. And of course, the government will undertake the necessary processes to recover that money.
The honourable member from Hamilton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Ontarians woke up this morning to find out that they got mugged by corporate oil and gas greed today. Gas prices are up 14 cents to $1.80 at the pumps. Now, this Liberal government almost found the courage to tax the profits of the oil and gas corporations, but buckled when after their lobbyists told them not to. So, both Liberals and Conservatives, we know, will always protect the record profits of the oil and gas corporations. So when will this Liberal government finally find the spine to say no to the lobbyists and actually stand up for hard-working Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, usually I say we will take no lessons from the Conservative, but this time I'll say that from the NDP. Mr. Speaker, Canadians watching at home know that we have been fighting for them every single day, Mr. Speaker. Every member on this side of the House wakes up in the morning to work for Canadians, to improve their lives, to make sure that we stabilize prices, Mr. Speaker. We introduced the largest reform on competition in this country, Mr. Speaker. Something that we should all be proud of, because that is the most consequential thing to help Canadians, not only for this generation, but for generations to come.
The honourable member from Ladysmith, Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, as wildfires devastate Canadian communities, the need for sustainable, clean energy is greater than ever. Yet, the Liberals continue to side with oil and gas and delay on placing a strong emissions cap on big polluters. The Conservatives, on the other hand, are happy to sit back and let the planet burn. New Democrats know that immediate action is needed to tackle the climate crisis. Why do the Liberals keep caving to big oil and refuse to enforce an emissions cap to save our kids' future?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, I would invite the New Democrat caucus and their leader to find the courage of their own convictions and come back to supporting us on a price on pollution. We are staying in the lane on fighting carbon, on fighting pricing on pollution each and every day. We're going to make sure that we have a planet that will be here for our kids and our grandkids. We will have a price on pollution. 8 out of 10 Canadians will get more money back. That's what we've set to do. We've run 3 elections on it. We're going to keep doing that, Mr. Speaker. We're going to defend Canadians. We're going to defend the planet. We're going to do it in a way that makes Canadians better off.
Easy there, buddy. Don't blow a freaking vein in your brain, dude. Yeah, it's gonna have a heart attack. Whoever just said that was
the honourable member from Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the chair of the Science and Research Committee and the member for Guelph, I'm really excited about the investments in science in the recent budget. Researchers and scientists across Canada have a vital role in developing innovation and knowledge. Can the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry highlight the important investments our government is making in our science and research space that will support students and generations of researchers to come?
Tough question. The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Speaker, I'd like to first thank my colleague for his leadership on research and science. Mr. Speaker, our budget has shown that we have vision and ambition for science and research in this country, Mr. Speaker, because on this side of the aisle, we know that the science of today is the economy of tomorrow. We have announced historic investment in infrastructure because we want to make sure that we would have state-of-the-art facilities for our researchers in this country. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, we have made an historic investment in grants to support our researcher, our young students, and the next generation, Mr. Speaker. With our investment, we know that science in this country will continue to make sure that we have prosperity for generations to come.
Good job.
The honourable member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Yesterday, Christian Firth of GC Strategies confirmed his home was raided by the RCMP. GC Strategies proposed a contract to the Deputy Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff and current Liberal campaign director, Jeremy Broadhurst. Wow. This contract led to Tuesday's raid on Christian Firth's home. So can the Deputy Prime Minister confirm her communication on a contract proposal that led to an RCMP raid yesterday?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As our colleague from Public Safety has made clear repeatedly in the last few minutes.
What's with this
is
chick's
a matter
face in the
under
back?
Investigation,
See this
both
blonde-haired chick?
internally and by the RCMP. It would be totally inappropriate
face so
for politicians
squished?
anywhere in this house to try to pretend that they would be better than those.
Does she not approve of what he's saying?
And the RCMP to do that type of work.
The honourable member from Calgary Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what's inappropriate. The ArriveCan app is under RCMP investigation, but we now know that there are 2 RCMP investigations connected to GC Strategies. The raid on Christian Firth's house 2 days ago raises more concerns about both contracts, one that we now know has a connection to the Deputy Prime Minister's office. After 9 years, GC Strategies has been paid more than $100 million by this Liberal government. So will the Deputy Prime Minister cooperate with the RCMP investigation?
The Honourable Minister for Public Works, Public Services and Procurement.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'ai déjà...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've already answered the question in English, so I'll do so in French as well. Indeed, we know that internal inquiries are taking place on this matter, and in the AG report, we now know that significant measures were brought into place and have been brought into place after the report. It would also be completely inappropriate for politicians in this House to think that they can do better than these organizations, especially the RCMP.
A member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
The Prime Minister's Arrive scam led to unprecedented testimony before this House of Commons, which the Liberal House Leader tried to shut down. And no wonder. This scam, which the NDP and Liberals voted for, cost taxpayers at least $60 million. Parliament ordered the government to pay the money back, but Liberals have not even asked for it to be returned. Now the RCMP have come knocking. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost, the corruption, or the crime. Will the Prime Minister finally follow the direction of Parliament and get back the Arrive scam cash?
Yeah, for real. Well, it's probably already being spent.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
I don't really know how you get the money that's being spent.
My honourable friend knows that this government always works collaboratively with Parliament. We've done so in many cases. In fact, parliamentary committees have also looked into this matter, and government officials have been, of course, available to answer all their questions and provide documents. As my colleague, the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, made clear, Mr. Speaker, there are internal audits taking place. The RCMP are also seized with this issue. We think it would be appropriate to allow these investigations to conclude, and I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, the government will always take steps to recuperate taxpayers' money that was inappropriately expended and hold those accountable that have abused taxpayers' money.
Right. The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, they haven't cooperated because this House voted to ask for the money to be paid back. And Christian Firth testified that this government has not taken any steps to seek the return of the money. After 9 years, it's clear that this Prime Minister is presiding over a severely incontinent contracting system where money constantly flows to NDP Liberal insiders. Canadians need a government they can depend on to stop the crime and end the corruption. Again, will the Prime Minister follow the direction of this Parliament and ask the Arrive scammers to return the money?
Return the money! The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague has just repeated his previous question. I'll give him the same answer. This government always takes the use of taxpayers' money extremely seriously. We have said that if taxpayers' money has been misplaced or mishandled, of course the government will ask that that money be returned and take the steps appropriate to recuperate that money. And in the case of individuals, my colleague may have taken note of the RCMP action yesterday. In the case of individuals who have abused taxpayers' money, of course the RCMP will take the steps necessary to investigate these matters.
It's a given.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. Mr. Speaker, this Liberal budget doesn't just represent the end of any respect for jurisdiction, it also represents the end of any level of competence in politics. Ottawa is trying to impose its priorities without even thinking about whether it makes sense. For example, building 40-floor apartment towers near schools in neighborhoods which it knows nothing about, or creating standards for skilled trades without knowing anything about it. Same thing for long-term care. Why not let competent people take care of issues that are in their fields of jurisdiction? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois should show some courage. It should tell us exactly what part of the budget they object to. Investing in housing? Do they object to helping to feed
he's already
kids
spent the
so
money,
they're
it's
not
like,
hungry at school?
I'm just going to bullshit my way through this, too.
Are they against investments to help municipalities and our rural regions? What exactly
he shouldn't
do they
ever
object
have
to? They should have the courage to say so, because right now they don't dare come out and say
like,
exactly what they don't like. They're
was it like
just
$40,000 a month
they're just
or something?
acting like they're best friends right next to them
Or
in the
was it more
house.
than that?
They
It was
don't
like
have
80.
the courage to tell us what they don't like. They
For
just
like
want to vote
30
against
hours
the
of work.
budget. The honourable member for Joliette. Well, Mr. Speaker, we are against interference in our jurisdiction. If the Liberals want to do Quebec politics, then they should run for the Liberal Party of Quebec. Otherwise, they should take care of things at the federal level. There's plenty to do. They should transfer money for housing instead of negotiating until 2025. They should put an end to the two-tier system for seniors. They should refund Quebec for asylum seekers. They should reform EI, as they've been promising since 2015. They should stop the fossil fuel industry from spoiling the fight against climate change. They should simply do their job. When will they? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. My colleague is a distinguished economist, Mr. Speaker. He knows that it's important for everyone to work together to take care of Canadians, including Quebecers, who are struggling these days. So, of course, he'll be very happy to see that $6 billion have been invested in Quebec over 4 years. Quebec is very happy about it. It's enabled 35,000 new childcare spots to be opened up. As an economist, as I am, he knows that that's very good for gender equality, for reducing poverty, and for helping our children develop, all while respecting provincial jurisdiction.
The honourable member from Edmonton Mill Woods.
I know we have all heard the horror stories on how bad auto theft has gotten in this country after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government's soft on crime policies. And now we have reports coming out of Toronto that a Good Samaritan had pulled over to help somebody in medical distress. And while he was helping them, his car was stolen. That's how broken this country has become. That a car is stolen every 6 minutes and violent carjackings are on the rise. Now, since they're not going to do anything about it, when will they just get out of the way and let a common sense Conservative government come in and stop the crime?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend knows that this government takes that very worrisome rise in criminality very seriously. I had a very good conversation last week with my counterpart in Ontario, the Solicitor General. We agreed on a series of measures that we can continue to do together with local police forces, the Ontario provincial police that are doing important work in this area, and of course the RCMP is always a partner with the Canadian Border Services Agency around transnational organized crime. Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to do everything possible in collaboration with our partners to bring this worrisome trend down.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, we learned in the media that a Montreal police officer had to fire on an auto thief who was trying to run him over. These thieves are more and more reckless. They're not afraid of the justice system. That's why our leader has presented a common-sense plan in order to increase sentences for auto thieves. Will the Prime Minister listen to this and crack down on auto theft? The Honourable Minister of Justice.
This guy's
there
terrible.
are two things I want to say, Mr. Speaker. First of all, as soon as C-75 came into this House, this very member voted against the bill, which would have increased sentences for auto theft. Now, here in the budget, we have unveiled an increase in sentences for auto theft. But this member and his leader have already said that they are against our budget and against our efforts to reduce auto theft. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, I think the Minister of Justice has forgotten that because of C5 and C75, with its catch and release system, auto thieves and other criminals in Montreal have nothing to be afraid of. They know that they can operate with impunity. They'll just be set free right away. That's what we see with C-75. Would the Minister of Justice or the PM answer the question? Will they increase sentences for auto thieves so that they actually have something to be scared of and so that they finally stop stealing cars in Montreal? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General. Just to be very clear, for constituents of this member, when C-75 was in this House, we proposed including sentences from 18 to 24 months for auto theft, and yet this member and all of his colleagues voted against that. And in this budget, we're not just going to change the criminal code, we're also going to change penalties for money laundering. And yet my colleague and all of his Conservative colleagues have already said they will vote against it. It's very hard to understand what he's talking about.
L'honorable député de Sudbury.
Mr. Speaker, eliminating violence against Indigenous women and girls, Two-Spirit and gender-diverse people is an urgent priority in Canada. Many have been calling for the implementation of a red dress alert to notify the public when an Indigenous woman, girl or Two-Spirit person goes missing. Can the Honourable Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations update the House on how the government is advancing these efforts?
The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations.
Mr. Speaker, the ongoing national crisis must come to an end. No one knows this better than the families of those who have lost their loved ones to this crisis. That is why we're working with Indigenous partners and leveraging Budget 2024 investment of $1.3 million to co-develop a regional red dress alert system. From housing to Indigenous policing, Budget 2024 continues to make progress on the systemic change needed to put this crisis to an end once and for all. I want to thank the member for that important question and for advocacy. We will continue to do this important work with Indigenous partners and colleagues across the floor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from
I've never seen that MP before. I've never seen that guy in my life.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the crime. Today we learned that thieves who stole $20 million in the biggest gold heist in Canadian history are out on bail. This is because of the Liberal government's shameful Bill C-75 that allows offenders to be in jail in the morning and back on the streets in the evening. Will the Prime Minister reverse his bail over jail policies in Bill C-75?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, the bill that the Conservative Party loves to discuss in this context actually included things such as increased penalties
I would say it's Trudeau who doesn't read. He doesn't read his briefs.
Criminality issue that is seizing Canadians right now. It's an issue that we need to all address. I find it a little bit disturbing and a little bit hypocritical, actually, that that member and all of his colleagues actually voted against that bill at the time, which would have helped augment the crimes against people who steal automobiles. But yet they have another opportunity. But unfortunately, they've already declared that vis-a-vis the further efforts we're taking to address automobile theft, they're continuing to vote against.
The honourable member from Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, offenders like Bernardo and Magnotta are living better than many Canadians with cable, canteen, and a beautiful gym. This is at a time when Canadians are having trouble when it comes to heating, eating, and housing. Breaking news, Mr. Speaker. The Correctional Officers Union tells us that crime is thriving. Not on the streets, but in jail.
Oh, you're talking
with
about
drones
me.
dropping drugs and serious weapons. When will this government realize that violent offenders shouldn't have access to these things? Who's running corrections?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend knows very well that the safety of the men and women who work in the correctional service is of paramount importance to the government. I have met with representatives of the union. I talked to the administration at the Correctional Service of Canada often about what steps we can take to give them the technologies and the tools necessary to protect the people who work in our correctional system. And Mr. Speaker, we will always do everything we can to keep these institutions safe for the brave women and men who do this difficult work for Canadians.
Right on. Good on. The honourable member from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
Mr. Speaker, top BC police are sounding alarm bells that drug decriminalization, a dangerous and radical NDP Liberal experiment, has handcuffed their ability to keep our communities safe. Under this dangerous social experiment, drug use is legal in hospitals, playgrounds, parks, and beaches. The Deputy Chief of Vancouver Police said due to decriminalization, there is nothing they can do about it. Will the Prime Minister end his dangerous and deadly drug decriminalization experiment? Yes or no?
Yeah, like, it's pretty simple, guys. Cocaine should be illegal, right?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, what the member chooses to ignore or not listen to when law enforcement also says is that they've been crystal clear fentanyl is driving the crisis and too many Canadians are dying as a result of it. People are dying alone, Mr. Speaker, and they're only concerned about one thing, misusing the facts. I will be meeting with my counterpart in BC and law enforcement partners to discuss how we can further work together to address diversion. But Mr. Speaker, diversion is illegal. The member knows that. And we expect law enforcement to do their job as well as the regulatory colleges and act swiftly to address it. We are working together, Mr. Speaker. Where are they?
The Honourable Member from Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Small and medium-sized businesses are an integral part of Canada's economy. They employ about 65% of Canada's workers. Recognizing that small businesses deserve additional supports, it's important for us to make doing business more affordable for entrepreneurs. Can the Minister of Small Business tell us about the measures in Budget 2024 that will help entrepreneurs in Kitchener-Conestoga and across Canada?
The Honourable Minister for Small Business.
I agree. Crispy bacon,
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague
weed
for
is
that
okay,
question.
booze I'm
As a
alright
former
with,
small
but
business entrepreneur
once you legalize
myself, I know the
cocaine,
importance of affordability for entrepreneurs.
That's just
so
stupid.
I'm glad that through Budget 2024, our government is committed
Apparently
to delivering
they have like a thing,
$2.5 billion
like police are having like a thing, they call it FIDO,
and to
and it's like
600,000 small
forget it,
businesses across Canada
drive
through
off.
the Canada Carbon
It's not actually
Rebate.
forget it, it's,
Reports say that
you know,
small
but
businesses are directly
just
impacted by
because
60% of them are directly impacted by
take,
climate change. And while the official
take
opposition
more to take them off the
continues
street
to
for
wanna
45
cut
minutes
the
and then
Canada
they just go
Carbon
back on
Rebate,
bail.
on
So
this
it's like,
side of the
forget
House,
it.
we're going to continue fighting climate change while putting money back into the
So it's
pockets
just
of
been lasting
Canadians
for
and small
years?
businesses.
Oh, okay.
The Honourable Member from Winnipeg Centre.
How does Ontario
Speaker,
elect
while the
conservative
Finance
premiers,
celebrates so-called feminist
but
policies in this year's budget, in
a lot of the towns are
Manitoba, the
freaking liberal.
Liberals have cut all funding for counselling and legal services for survivors of sexual violence at the Survivors Hope Crisis Centre. Time and again, this Prime Minister shows that he is a fake feminist. Meanwhile, the Conservative leader undermines women's rights at every corner, cozying up to extreme misogynists like Alex Jones. Will the Minister do what's right and restore funding for survivors at the Hope Crisis Centre?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, we know there's always more to do, and I really appreciate the member opposite and the work that she does on the Status of Women Committee. She is a true advocate for women, but I will point to the fact that this budget does cover contraceptives for women. 9 million Canadians will be able to make choices on their bodies because of this investment. We've got investments against workplace sexual harassment. We've got investments to have more childcare spaces in this country and more investments to support queer and trans people in this country, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Richmond North Basca. Mr. Speaker, the government has brought back in a requirement for most Mexicans to have a visa in order to come to Canada.
Independent?
People with valid work permits can come to Canada with just an electronic
There was
authorization.
only a couple of these independents. I've never
but
seen
members
this
of
guy.
their family and their children are not included. They need to get a visitor visa for their children, but that takes much longer. A mother in my riding lost her job because she couldn't come back to Canada without leaving her child in Mexico. It's a lose-lose situation for the worker, her family, and for the business. Will the Minister of Immigration do something about the situation promptly? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. I'd like to ask the member to come see me after this session in order to discuss the situation. Now we know that people get their visa in Mexico. That's the rule, and if there are any exceptions that need to be discussed, I would encourage him to come see me.
Following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, I understand there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence. I now invite the House to rise and observe a minute of silence in memory of the victims of the tragic event that happened 4 years ago in Nova Scotia. Honourable members.
All right, so now are they done with QP?
The honourable member from Mackenzie.
They're pretty much done. They've got like 2 questions left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From Grand Prairie, Mackenzie, I do appreciate there's a lot of titles in this House. Mr. Speaker, during question period, you ruled, pardon me, Mr. Speaker, in the past, you have ruled that false titles for individual members must not be used in this House. And you have ruled that those need to be immediately withdrawn. Today, during question period, the member from Milton used a false title. You did not. You ruled correctly, as you have consistently, that member needed to withdraw that immediately.
Yeah.
The member from Milton refused to do so. He had a flippant apology saying that he was sorry that he caused disruption. That was not, Mr. Speaker, what you had ruled. You had ruled that he must withdraw the false title that he used for the member of the official opposition. The concern that I think members of Parliament have, especially on these benches over here, is that there seems to be an inconsistency to the rulings that, Mr. Speaker, you have undertaken. Mr. Speaker, if you'll allow me.
Well, I appreciate the point that the member from Mackenzie, Grand Prairie, has raised, and it is one which I intend to address immediately. I do see that the honourable member from Milton is rising, and I hope it is to do what would be consistent with the Speaker's observations and rulings in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I withdraw.
Sorry. So I did hear the honourable member withdraw his comment. The honourable member...
He said withdraw. He did say withdraw? Okay.
From Grand Prairie, Mackenzie is rising, I hope, on a new point of order.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday, the member from North Island, Powell River, did not immediately withdraw her comments, and she was sanctioned for the remainder of the day. There is an inconsistency in the rulings in this House. That member was not offered a half an hour to decide if or not they would withdraw. Mr. Speaker, for the benefit of this House, what will your rulings be henceforth?
Perfect question. You should have kicked him out and asked him to retract when he did, and affirmed it.
Thank the honourable member for his intervention. I will continue to apply the rulings as has been indicated in the House. The honourable member...
The honourable member for Drummond on a point of order. Mr. Speaker, on the same theme as my Conservative colleague, but complementary to his comment, for the past few months, there has been a huge irregularity in the
so after this point of order, I'm going
the freedom of expression in this House. It's a fundamental part of parliamentary privilege, and we can't do our work as parliamentarians adequately if we don't actually know what the rules to be applied are when it comes to freedom of speech. There are some expressions that could be worse than others, have different sanctions, so there's some irregularities. Mr. Speaker, all I want to hear is for you to think and to give us clear limits and clear indications of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable when we rise in the House of Commons, so that we don't just simply walk on eggshells every time we rise here in this chamber. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the honourable member for Drummond for his statement. And I just wanted to mention to all of our colleagues a statement made on the 18th of October 2023, pursuant to which directives were given regarding what is acceptable to say in this House. That being said, I will have the opportunity to continue my discussions with the leaders of every political party represented in the House to find clearer indications as to what is acceptable, so we can have impassioned debates that still respect decorum and what is acceptable here in this House.
Yeah, you got to learn what's acceptable, man. You're biased. All right. Anyway, guys.
Point of order.
See you guys. We will be back tomorrow, hopefully, for QP.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've consulted various parties. I think